Welcome everybody, this is SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group. This is the bi-weekly sync. It is March 26th, 2020. And today we have quite a few items on the agenda which we want to go through. So we're going to go through a quick update on the SharePoint Framework. We're going to then go through what's happening within our individual open source projects, so updates on those. And then we have 3 different demos. So I'm going to be relatively fast on the updates. And Hugo, I do apologize, I forgot about adding your sample slide in here. Hugo is going to actually note who are the latest samples which have been added to our open source repos. So that's something what we want to actually get included in the first 50 minutes in this course, and then the rest 45 minutes will be then demos and Q&A in the end if there's time. Most likely today we will not have time for that. So let's actually get moving on things because, well, anyway. So quick reminder, opportunities for participating on this community calls. If you're interested on doing any contributing and being part of the community calls, you can definitely do an SPFx demo or PnP demo and add PnPjs demo in here or any other demo related on Microsoft 365 client-side development technologies. You can definitely contribute in GitHub. We have a lot of stuff available in GitHub where you can contribute if you have time and interest on doing that. And definitely the last and most important thing, please do give us feedback. Feedback, super important. Something isn't working, something is working. Please let us know. Just a word of a reminder, positive feedback is always good as well. We keep on, it's actually quite, it's partly sad, but it's understandable as well. So a lot of the open source initiatives and projects typically hear negative feedback, even though people spend hours and hours on trying to share their learnings for others for free. And then they get negative feedback because something isn't working and all of that. So try to give that positive feedback as well. We could actually try as a community that if you give negative feedback for something, which is fine, we need to have constructive feedback as well. You owe 2 positive feedbacks. So that would be a fair game. So that would actually engage or increase the positivity in the community. So if you give negative or constructive feedback for somebody, then you owe 2 positive feedbacks in social media or in GitHub. Deal? Yes, everybody's super excited. I can see the audience cheering and everybody's super excited on this thinking. Now, but let's try to be positive as well. Quick reminders on the assets. I need to update some of these URLs pretty soon because we're moving into this Microsoft 365 PnP terminology. But SharePoint DevDocs, AKMS DevDocs, our video channel is not just about SharePoint. It's definitely Microsoft 365 functionalities as well. Teams development, craft usage, and all of that, and community demos and SharePoint dev issues. And then the open source is in 2 main organizations. We are doing some shuffling between the repos right now with the organizations. What's cool about the GitHub is that that's completely seamless for you. So even though you would have pulled down a repo in the SharePoint organization and we move the repo to PnP organization, you can actually check in stuff and push stuff still against the repo. So everything is fully automatic in GitHub. So it's a really, really brilliant system. Now, quick update from the SharePoint Framework side. I didn't actually want to spend too much time on this one, so I wanted to actually just recap where we are and what are we planning to do. Obviously, the current situation in the world is slowing down quite significantly some of the development. There are areas where we are pushing heavily forward, like, for example, the SharePoint Framework support in store. And it's not just about app source. So we're looking into having the SharePoint Framework support in the Office store or in the, how would I put it, SharePoint store, where you can actually see the SharePoint add-ins right now. So we're pretty soon we're going to start supporting then SharePoint Framework solutions in that store as well. And then you can actually put SharePoint Framework solutions also to app source together with any other configurations in the app source as well. We're currently working with few different partners and ISVs on validating this process. So we have a kind of a preview program for a small group of ISVs, and then things will get released hopefully relatively soon, and then everybody else can actually start pushing their solutions to the store as well. So really cool stuff. It is finally moving forward. But I don't want to promise an ETA because you will hold me accountable on that one. Unified toolchain for Microsoft 365 workloads coming up as well. More on that one pretty soon, actually, as well. So we're looking into having a unified tooling across the Microsoft 365. Talked about this one quite a few times already. Native support for Fluid Framework immediately when, well, at least when Fluid Framework will be properly released. Faster inner loop, more extensions. No ETA currently for 1.11, mainly because of the current situation in the world, because that's also delaying our internal development process due to understandable reasons. So bear with us. We're working as fast as we can on getting things moving. I think everybody understands that there might be some delays. Now, how about Office UI Fabric 7 support? From the question Christian Walling is asking on the chat, the Office UI Fabric 7 will be supported natively in SharePoint relatively soon, and when that happens, then we will have the support for it also in SharePoint Framework. So we need to delay slightly on that one. Right now, it is not. I don't think you can actually do that, but we understand that people want to do that, so that's definitely coming. Good. And anyone know how taxonomy service REST support is doing? I concentrated only on SharePoint Framework Roadmap in here. The REST service for taxonomy, well, actually, the Graph-native API for taxonomy service, let's be precise, is still planned to get released relatively soon. I can't give you an exact date, but I can say probably it's closer to say weeks than months. Well, 8 weeks would be 2 months, but 8 months, it would be way too much already. So you can figure out where and when we're going to announce something. So there will be a taxonomy, there will be a Graph APIs for taxonomy service, just to be clear on that. I didn't call out all of that stuff in here because it's concentrated on the SPFx story. Now, PnPjs, a quick update from here. Right now, Patrick is still on family leave, coming back actually, unless I'm completely mistaken, our situation has changed from next week. So we can expect then a updated releases for PnPjs in the April timeframe. Rabbits will take over the world. Now, Patrick has been concentrating on the family, which is a good thing, and the 2.03 was released in February. There has not been any critical things in here, so there has not been really a release requirement for releasing new things. And PnPjs is a great way of using SharePoint REST APIs in a JavaScript implementations. On the Office 365 CLI, there are a few updates. So new preview version 1.8, and that has the SPFx Doctor for checking compatibility of dev environments with SPFx versions. Super awesome capabilities. Creating Microsoft Graph subscriptions, removing site design tasks, additional Office 365 usage reports commands, updated Teams commands for support new TAC v2 channels, and new sample scripts. A really important thing also the sample scripts. So in the CLI documentation, there's now better sample documentation and additional things, so people can more easily understand how you can take advantage of this command line tool. Because especially if you come from a, let's say, from a classic Windows development side or a classic SharePoint farm solutions transforming into this new way of doing business, the CLIs might seem slightly weird. So the sample scripts are certainly help on that. And thank you, Hugo, for the comment related on SPFx Doctor. It is absolutely brilliant. So that is a great way of checking that your environment is matching what you want to target your SPFx solution on. So if you're running into any problems related on, hey, I can't get to getting started solutions to work, or I can't get the tutorial, you can run the command and it will tell you what's wrong and how you fix that. And that's brilliant. That's really, really cool. SPFx Reusable Components, a lot of actually movement here as well. So the React Controls 1.17 release version was released, and there was 4 new control, like 20 PRs with additional enhancements, and then 20 PRs for bug fixes or improvements. So really cool stuff. There's, as an example, there's localization of all SharePoint online languages for the controls with auto translation capabilities. So basically, all of these controls can natively translate by themselves automatically to a language which the site is being presented for the end user. And that's actually pretty mind-boggling feature. We definitely need to get Elio or somebody else to actually demonstrate, or Alex or somebody else to demonstrate that functionality in practice in this call, because that's insanely cool. Everything can be auto-translated. Now, and plenty of other stuff happening also on the React property control side in this project. On the SPFx Yeoman Generator, quick update on this one as well. There has not been that much progress in here. Well, to be honest, you never say that it's feature ready, but there has not been demand for improving the generator that much. And this one is the generator which is extending the out-of-the-box generator by adding useful capabilities, by increasing your productivity as a developer for creating SharePoint Framework solutions. So you can then answer questions related on CI/CD. You can get the PnPjs included there. You can use associate controls, SPFx controls to a project automatically, and it will then bundle that in using, again, the out-of-the-box Yeoman Generator, but then decorate that with additional settings. And it's really cool that it's supporting Angular already. Angular 9 support is now being kind of planned and designed, which might be interesting area where you can help Stefan Bauer. But please reach the Stefan Bauer if you're interested on helping with this one. Now, Hugo, I saw you live on the chat at least. Let's do a quick recap what has happened in our SPFx sample site. So Hugo, it's your stage.
Oh, thank you.
And here's Hugo.
Thank you. So we have a lot of extensions, a lot of new extensions, samples. You can go to there at aka.ms/SPFx extensions. There's 74 samples now, but we have 3 new samples, one from João Mendes, which is Teams notifications, which is really cool. It actually gets notifications out of Teams and shows them in SharePoint. We have page comment sentiments, which uses analytics to actually detect the sentiment on the page and actually gives an icon to show how well this is doing. And this is by Lewis. And then we have document preview list view command set, which actually allows you to preview pretty much any kind of document within the page without having to navigate to the documents. And then from the web parts side, we have a total of 176 samples. So we're getting a lot of great samples. We have, probably the best sample out there is one by David Warner and Hugo Bernier, which shows how you can add custom CSS to list formatting on a web page. We have another one by Alex Rentiv, who is showing how to use the PnP field controls and PnP and create that within a PnP list view on a page. Then we have a new one which allows you to manage SPFx solution using application lifecycle management APIs. And then DevRadar by Saulo Oliveira, which actually works with the GitHub DevRadar. And finally, the last one from Akash, which shows you how to check whether a user is in a group and shows the list of users in a group. There's a whole bunch of new samples waiting in pull requests, so I expect we're going to have a lot more samples next call. Thank you.
Thanks, Hugo. I did saw the sample which you contributed as well, so that's pending in the pull request side, which is really cool related on adaptive cards and SharePoint. So really, really cool stuff. Also, Akash is on the call, and he's going to demonstrate the check user group sample in this call as well. One thing before we go to the demos, and I will let Vardhaman and Garry to do the demos. I will need to promote you most likely as a presenter first. Just one note related on, it was Dinesh asked around the supporting latest version of Node.js with SPFx solutions. Right now, we're still at version 10 level, and version 12 or 14 is actually coming out pretty soon, or did come out already. It will require a new version of SharePoint Framework Yeoman Generator, and that would be the 1.11, but it will support whatever is the suitable next latest version for the development. But again, there are plans. We want to keep updating the support, but I can't give you an exact timeline when that will happen. Now, Vardhaman and Garry. Garry, I can see you at least in a call as a presenter.
Yeah, I'm here as well.
And Vardhaman is a presenter as well.
Yes, so let me share my screen first. So first I'll introduce a couple of concepts, and then Garry will take over, talk about the React hooks part of it. I'll try to be as quick as I can because I can see there's lots of interesting demos coming up. So first thing we're going to talk about today is SharePoint Framework service scopes. then how to use service scopes in together with React context, and finally how to use the React context, service scope, and React hooks. And then Garry is going to come in and talk about more about React hooks as well. So before we talk about SharePoint Framework Service Scope, let me just kind of set some context of the web part which we are going to see. So this is a typical org chart web part, which I was playing around initially when I was discovering service scopes. So as you can see, it checks the current user, it gets their manager from the user profile service, and then it gets the reports from the user profile service as well. So for getting that, we obviously need to talk to the user profile service REST API. And the way we could do it is by straight away using the SPFx client, which is available in the SPFx context. Or if we don't want to pass around the context, maybe to your components, or maybe if the components are deeply nested within your React tree, what you can do is pass in just the service scope. Now, the one good thing which passing in the service scope does for us is it allows us to make our components easily testable. So this is my component, and using the service scope, I can register either the correct implementation of the user profile service. This is a custom service, or I can register a mock implementation. So if we are testing our code and we want to return mock data depending on where the web part is running. So in this case, if the web part is running in the context of SharePoint or as a classic web part, we are fetching real data from SharePoint. Whereas if it's not running there, using the service scope, we are fetching the data from the mock user profile service, which just returns JSON blobs. So using service scopes, we can register our services on the service scope, which is, so the service scope, stepping back a bit, service scope is the SPFx implementation of the service locator pattern, where you register services on it and you can consume the services on it. And as far as I know, the SharePoint framework itself also uses the same kind of model for registering the AAD HTTP client or MS Graph client, so on. So we are just using the same kind of model to register our custom third-party services as well. If I go in user profile service, you can see here that the context is not being passed in, and when you register the service, when you try to consume a service using this approach, the service scope is automatically passed in, and then you can fetch the HTTP client, page context, and so on from it, and directly make a call to SharePoint. Now, the one thing about this approach is, even though you're not passing in the context, you are still passing in the service scope. And if any of your child components in React need that service scope, you will have to pass that down the component tree. One way around that is by using the React context. What we will do in the React context world is React gives us basically an object to store all the data we want, which is shared globally by the application. Now, this is different to the SharePoint framework context or web part context. So before we actually go and see how React context helps us here, we'll need to create a context object in React, where we'll have the service scope property. Now this is actually a different web part where all we are doing is getting the user's graph, details from the Microsoft Graph API and displaying it on the screen. So an implementation of this is, you can see here, it is just displaying the username. Now, the way we do that is first by creating the React context object, registering with React context, and then from our top level component in the application, we just assign a value to that. And as you can see, this hello user component, we are not passing in any service scopes or any context to it. Internally, the hello user object gets the service scope from its properties, and then it is able to call the Microsoft Graph service to set the state and show the user. Now, how is this possible? We're not passing in anything here when calling the component, but if we go inside the component, the property, the service scope property is already filled in. Now, the way we do that is with something called higher order component in React, which is if I go back to the hello user component, when we export it, we just wrap it with a with service scope higher order component. And it is, think of it just like a function where you pass in an argument. It uses the React hooks to get the app context from React and then passes it in as a property. Once that service scope is infused, it can be then used to fetch all the details or all the services registered from it. Now, I mean, it can be a bit much to wrap your head around all of this. So I've got a few blog posts which kind of step through all the different aspects of the code. And then I'll post a link to this in the chat as well. Now, if you're familiar with React hooks, if you're familiar with React context, this might seem a bit of an overkill to you. It's like, why am I not using the React hooks directly? And that's because React hooks work mainly with React functional components. And there might be already a lot of code out there which is using SharePoint class components in React, because that is what we have been using for a long time. Now, this is an easy way to just wrap your component with this higher order component if you want to get started with hooks or if you want to get started with the service scope stuff. But if you're starting something new, I think the recommendation from the React team is to start with hooks, start using hooks now where you can. And if that is your situation, then the recommendation definitely is to go with a full hooks approach where you don't bother with the higher order components. You don't have to do a lot of this stuff. And Garry is going to then next talk about a full hooks approach where you only use functional components and not class components. So Garry, if you're on the call, feel free to take it away.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. So just show you the web part that we've got. It's very similar to what Vardhaman was showing. It's the same output. It's the same example as what he's just shown. Just showing the person's name, calling the graph. So to go through kind of what has been done in this approach is that I've used functional components for the web parts and just to basically show you the differences between the two approaches. So we're still passing through the service scope as a property. And we are still then setting the service scope in the context, which is created in a similar way. So we're creating this context here and reusing this in the web part. So we have our app context provider, which is obviously providing this globally, this service scope globally to all of the child components, where we've got hello user. Kind of things to point out is that there's no this involved in functional components, which you find in class components. If I go into hello user, so now we can see that it's effectively doing the same job, but we're doing it in a slightly different way. So we've changed to a functional component, and rather than using the this.setState approach, we're actually using the useState hook. So we're setting an initial variable for storing the name value and creating a function that we're going to use to update the state with. And rather than using a higher order component, we can access the global context directly from within this component by using the useContext hook to bring back our service scope. And here we're using useEffect in replace of component didMount. So useEffect is a hook that will allow you to run a function basically when your state changes. Although for this example, we're just passing an empty array. This means it's just going to run the first time this component mounts, which is useful for where you want to fetch your data. So we are creating a graph client factory by using the service scope, and then we call we create a client and then call the me endpoint to return the current user's name, and then use the setName function to update the state. Move that by accident. And then in here, this is where our component actually renders. Again, there's no need for this here. We can just directly access the state variable by its name, and it presents it on the page. So it's a functional component is a nice, simplest, easy way to build your components now. It reduces a lot of the boilerplate. And if you're starting to create React components, then definitely I think going through the hooks approach is the place to start. So this code is available as a sample. I actually pushed the PR last night after Vesa called me out on it on PnP Weekly because I didn't put it forward as a sample. So hopefully it will be available for you to look at in the samples very soon.
Yeah, it will be definitely there pretty soon. Thanks, Garry.
Great. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Garry. Thanks, Vardhaman. Really, really powerful stuff. Really, really great stuff. And this is exactly the stuff what we definitely want to also cover. So the efficient ways of doing development in the calls, but then at the same time, demonstrating different functionalities and samples and solutions is super valuable. So thank you for that. Next, we are moving to Akash. I think, are you a presenter? Did we update you already as a presenter?
Yeah, I'm a presenter.
Yep, you are. So we can actually jump on your screen.
Yeah.
And from there.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Akash Bhardwaj. I work as a Microsoft 365 developer at HCL Technologies. So I have experience working on SharePoint, Office 365, and Microsoft Azure. And after this call, you can connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. So these are the handles. So today I'll be giving the demo of an SPFx web part that I recently contributed. So this one is called the check user group. So it's an SPFx web part using which you can find all the groups a particular user is member of, or all the members in an Office 365 or Azure AD security group. So you don't have to move out of SharePoint, and just by adding this web part, you can quickly get this information. And I've also added the option to extract all this information to a CSV file. So the web part uses Microsoft Graph API to fetch these user and group member details. The directory.read.all permission will be required for this to work. And in particular, the APIs used for getting this information would be the groups, group ID members API to get the members in a group, and then the user's email member of API to get all the groups user is member of. So apart from this, to extract this information to a CSV file, so I have used this React CSV third-party package. I have added the link for this in this sample only, so you can check it out. It's pretty easy to use. So using this, we extract all the data to a CSV file. So let me show how it works. So this is a page in which I have added this web part. The web part doesn't have any configurables as such, and you can start using it by just adding it here. So here I have this select user. First of all, I have two pivots at the top here. So one is the check user membership and the check group members. So this check user membership would be used to get all the groups a user is member of. So here I have this select user people picker. So this is a PnP reusable people picker control that I have used. So if I enter my name here, so this would now show me the basic details about all the groups that I'm a member of, like the name, description, and the group type, whether it's Office 365 or a security group. And this is a details list of the Office UI Fabric React. So I can simply sort all this information by either name, description, or the group type as well. And then I have this export to Excel link here. So if I click on it, so this would extract all this information to a CSV file. So yes, so here you can see this is all the information that we saw here. And apart from this, there is also this text box that says filter by name. So this can be used to quickly search whether a group that you want to find, if it's available in this list or not. So similar to this, if I go over to the other tab called the check group members, so here I can enter the group name. This is one of the groups that I have. So now it would show me all the users that are added to this group. So currently there are 2 only. And similar to the other one, we have this filter by name option here, as well as the export to Excel that would export this information to a CSV. So that's it for the functionality. Now let me jump over to the code. So this is my webpart.ts file. So from here I'm calling this check user group component. This is my React component. Here I have, this is basically the root component that includes some other child components. So first of all, there is this pivot control here that has 2 pivot items for the check user membership and the check group members. And now whenever I select one of these pivot items, so another child component would get rendered. So these 2 folders are the ones where I can find these components. So if I go over to this one, so here, first of all, I have this list of all the columns, like the name, description, group type. And now let me start by going to the render method. Yes, so here is first of all the people picker control, the PnP control I have. So for this, the principal types I have selected it as principal type.user, so that in this pivot item, I can only select the individual users because I need to get the groups they are part of. Then this is my text field to filter by name. And then this CSV link is the component that I've used for that third-party package to export this information to a CSV. So inside this, I've added that command bar button for the export to Excel. And then I have my details list that contains all this information. So on the on-change event for this people picker, I have this method, get user groups. So what this would do is it would call this get user groups method of the MS Graph service class. So this is a service class that I've added here. And herein you can see I have added 2 methods here. One is called the get user groups and the other is the get group members. So here is where I'm calling those Graph API endpoints to get the information that I want. Like this one, the groups, group ID and members. This is to get all the members in a group. And above here, I have this users email member of API. So this would get me all the groups user is part of. So using this, I'm getting all this information. And then I'm simply updating this to this group item state variable I have. And this is the one that is used in this details list. So this was for the check user membership, and similarly I have this check group members class as well. So here also most of the things are similar, but the method would be different, like where I'm calling this get group members of the service class to get the members in a group. And then here in the people picker, in this component I have specified the principal types to be as the distribution list, security group, or the SharePoint group, so that I can't select individual users in this pivot tab. And the rest of the functionality is similar, like I have this filter by name here as well, the CSV link. The file name would be different for the user information and the group membership. And then I have the details list. So this is pretty much for the web part functionality, and here in the package solution, like I said earlier, the directory.read.all would be the permission scope that is required for executing both the Microsoft Graph APIs. So I guess that's it for my end. Any questions? I would like to answer them in the chat box.
Akash, one thing before you disconnect, just a pointer on what we're saying here. This is absolutely brilliant solution and great solution demonstrating the power of the PnP SPFx controls and the Graph APIs and all of that. So really great stuff. One thing, obviously, the downside of this solution is that it requires quite heavy permissions to the Azure AD, which is the directory read and all. One way of kind of approaching this challenge could be also that we have the isolated permissions enabled. So in the package solution JSON right now, the isolation was not on. Because now if the isolation is not on, then we grant the same token for every single SPFx web part. But again, everything is debatable, and this is a sample demonstrating the capability, and it's a great sample for that. Can you go back still on the Visual Studio side? Just pinpointing that if you would like to have a unique permission management for this solution, I know Akash knows this, but it's domain isolated. It would be the option. And then what happens behind of the scenes, if that's true, is that we create automatically an Azure AD application, and we only grant permissions for this particular web part, so that if another web part is hitting this API, it would not actually, it wouldn't accidentally get too much token permissions, but again, it's how we handle the tokens and how do we things. And this is a great, absolutely brilliant sample on demonstrating the power of Graph and SPFx controls as well. So really great stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Visa.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you. Now we are on the schedule. This is absolutely brilliant. It's probably because I didn't talk too much on the start. I will take full blame of any of the delays in this calls. Now, next one we would have Boo George from ThreeWill, and I noticed that you're already a presenter, which is great. And
yep,
screen sharing works. Yep.
Yep. And everybody can hear me. And I guess I get 5 more minutes since everybody went faster.
Yeah. So there we go. There we go. Well, now if we close 2 minutes to hour, that would be perfect. But let's see how the system goes, and we'll adjust. Realities of life. You never know what's going to happen. But yep. Thank you, Boo. We can see and we can hear. All good to go. So take it away.
Cool. All right. So my name is Bo George, and that's not to be confused with Boy George of Culture Club. I'm a principal consultant at ThreeWill, and there's a bunch of stuff where you can find me if you want to hunt me down. And ThreeWill, we're a consulting company that we focus on collaborative solutions for, it seems like ever since Groove wasn't owned by Microsoft, and when you used to have to customize SharePoint by editing ONET XML. So been doing it for a while. And so what I'm going to show you guys today is a question and answer SPFx solution we developed for a customer. We had to get their permission for me to demonstrate it today. It's not open source yet, but in the next week or two, hopefully we'll talk to them and get approval and make it available as a open source project for everybody. So I don't have a lot of slides. This is really the last one before the demo. You know, the first question is really why build it? We all know Yammer now supports question and answers, but this was built kind of last summer. And the customer didn't want to utilize multiple products, so Yammer for it and governing Yammer and the groups and all the membership and all that kind of stuff. And at the time, it didn't support Q&A and stuff like that. So Yammer wasn't an option for us at that time, but I realized that it could be for some now. Also, this customer was migrating from Jive. Anybody that knows Jive, they have spaces and groups, and questions is a really popular content type in that, where anybody typically in the company can come ask a question, and then the people who own a Jive place or site could answer that question. So that really fed into the mentality behind why they wanted this. And so they have, or they have more than this now, but they had like 1,500 site collections that we migrated, and you wanted it to all be in one box, right? You want your question and answer data to live in SharePoint lists as a part of the site with the same permission structures, SharePoint groups, and all that kind of stuff, and make it easy, really easy to provision, create sites the end users request, and deprovision, delete them when they're no longer needed. So those are a lot of the factors that went into why we did this. And kind of with that, I'll just switch over to a demonstration of what this is, which I took the benefits lookbook, because that benefits site's a really good scenario for where people ask a lot of questions. And the only thing that I've changed on it is put this web part here. So it really doesn't take up a lot of space on a site. You can come in here as a normal end user and search for questions. So, you just start with a what phrase or a where phrase or anything like that, and your questions will filter. And this thing is already doing security trimming. So if the owner of the benefit site didn't want anybody in the world to ask a question, or their visitors, they could turn off this button. But if they want to allow anybody, including end users, to ask a question, they can turn it on. And I'll show those properties in a minute. But really asking a question for an end user is just simple as clicking on the question and it launches to another page. This is the same web part on an application page. And, my questions always start with, what the heck is Bo demoing? And this is a rich text editor that at the time I don't think an SPFx control existed for it, or I didn't find one. So it's actually using Quill under the scenes, under the covers, and then it's styled with all the Office Fabric icons. So you can come in here and put, a bulleted list of stuff and just kind of go down the line and do that sort of stuff. I actually I turned off the ability to upload images, but we could support that as well. But somebody could, go and post their question, and what you'll see after I post is that I'm automatically following this question, so I'll be notified of replies to the question. I can like my own questions, or other people could come in here and like it. When testing this, I talk to myself a lot, so I'd come in here and reply to a question and just sort of start that thread going, and you can reply to replies and all that sort of stuff. The threading goes basically as deep as you would expect. And then I could close this question, and now that I've launched to this page, it acts more like a SPA type application where you close it and you can see a list of questions. Again, it's the same web part, just configured in a different way. So I have some fake users in here, and you notice some of the icons show that the question hasn't been answered yet, and then some have a check mark to show that it's answered. You can actually filter to open and answered and stuff like that in here. So I could, if I'm a helpful person, I can say what's open out there that I could help out with, or if I'm just looking to self-serve, what's been answered. So this Michael Jordan question is the one I kind of play around with. So you could click on a question, and just to kind of show you what the evolution might look like is, Michael Jordan's asking about his championship rings and how he gets coverage for them, and different people. Will Holland has responded, and you see when he responded, and then I responded to him, and you get that threading. And then at some point, a question is answered, and so since Jordan asked the question, he has the ability to mark somebody else's answer as the one that is the answer. Myself, I am also a moderator of the questions, so I could mark it as an answer. And that's as simple as, clicking the question, and I just unmarked it as an answer. So this is sort of what an unmarked scenario looks like, or a marked scenario where myself or Jordan, since he asked, marked it as an answer. Again, anybody could come in and mark this as helpful or like things, so any end user can do that stuff. And then only the person who asked the question or a moderator could delete their question. Only the person who asked, replied to a question, or the moderator could delete replies. So you see stuff like that. And then if I go back to the list, I'll just show you some of the web part properties that are available. So on the application page, it'll show like this instead of the other dialog. Most of these are kind of typical behavior modification ones, but the ones that I think are kind of interesting that I don't see quite as much are these things that I did for permissions. So this is the toggle that a site owner, so not an author, but a site owner could actually turn on and let visitors ask questions. And that way, an author could come in here and edit, and this is actually disabled for them because they don't have the permission to do that grant, but an owner does. So that's what this button would toggle is, can anybody who's visiting my site ask questions? And in the case of our customer, most of these sites, our communication sites, opened up to tens of thousands of users, so that's who they're letting ask questions. And then this other button here is Manage Notification Group, and what this is you do have your owners, visitors, and members typically, but those may not be the ones you want to moderate the questions. It may be a different group of people, a subset, or a cross-section. And so this allows us to say who are the people that need to be notified when new questions are asked, or tweak or delete bad replies and all that sort of stuff. So these two areas are the things I'll show you a little bit in code about how we did that. The rest of this is just making the web part do different things, different sorts, and show and hide stuff. So with that, I will get into code because that's why we're all here, right? So this is the solution, and I have a bunch of tabs opened up here that I'll just kind of walk through. So the package solution is pretty much your typical package. But because this thing needs to be deployed to, thousands of site collections kind of created on demand, I am using old school element XML files and schemas and stuff like that to provision the underlying lists. And I actually had, upgrade versions of this too. But so the elements XML file, for any of you that have been around a long time, have the love-hate relationship with this thing. Lots of fields defined in there for all the different things I want to track. And then I define two content types, so a question and a reply. And you'll see that a reply could actually have a collection of reply IDs and stuff like that, and a question ID. And then, of course, the list instance. So this is the underlying question list that we set hidden so nobody can just necessarily see it in site contents. And then that application page I'm talking about. So that's the elements XML file. I really like the earlier demo about using hooks. When I wrote this, I was sort of doing Redux for the first time. I come from an Angular background, and so I really love dependency injection in Angular, and I tried to do some of that sort of stuff here. So these are some of my services that do SharePoint, typically operations, and I was using Redux and their middleware to inject them so that my actions and my components kind of had a single instance of a service to use to make data calls and things like that. If there's time, I'll show the actions as well, but it's probably not as special or unique to show. But this was sort of me coming from an Angular world into a React world and trying to still live the same life. So permission service, you'll notice that I actually didn't inject that here because the only thing that uses it is the web part. So none of my children components use the permission service. But it really only has two methods that are important. And this can visitors ask questions. So you notice that toggle, that web part might be on 10 different pages sometimes. And this is used by the web part to figure out what the toggle state should be. Should it show as letting visitors ask questions or not, right? So it's a web part property, but it's dynamically updated by actual site settings. So it just figures out, get the visitors group, get the role bindings, find the visitors role, and then tell me, hey, does that visitors group have the ability to add list items? If they do, then that toggle is going to say true. If not, it's going to say false. So it's dynamically updated anytime you open that panel. And then this is the toggle. So only, like I said, site owners are the only ones that actually have the ability to do this. But if it's already set to true, then I want to reset the role inheritance on that list, because I want to turn it off. So I say, hey, I want this questions list to have the same permission as the rest of the site. And that's what this reset does. Or if you're toggling the other way to say, hey, I want to let end users ask questions, then I need to figure out the contributor role. Let me find the associated visitors group to this site. And then I'm going to take those two things and I'm going to break the inheritance from the site itself. And I'm going to grant the group, the visitor group, the ability to contribute to that list. So that's how that toggle works. How all of that stuff where I said moderators could add and delete, and the person who asked the question could do this, and the person who replied could do that. All of that stuff is sort of managed through what I figure out in the user service. So, I just get the current user, and then I sort of prime my object with a whole bunch of falses that say, hey, they can't do anything, they can't add, delete, edit, whatever. And then in this update permission information, this is the guy that really tells me everything else I need to know for that particular user. And so I figure out, based on the effective permissions they have on that list, can they view items, can they add items, edit, delete, and so on. And stuff like, can they add items, that will influence whether or not they see that button on the screen, because if they can't add items, maybe only members and owners can, maybe visitors can't. So these sort of attributes tell me that sort of information, and use that on the screen. So that's the two services that are sort of different. Since I have a couple more minutes left, I'll just go through a few other things. So like I said, I use React, so you see the patterns, and I have shoutouts, one more slide about shoutouts, using connected dispatch and connected state. Love to switch this to hooks at some point, because all this boilerplate mapping state and props and all that kind of stuff became a little bit annoying. But in here, this is kind of my default container. The one thing I wanted to show in here is that with Quill, I was able to make it look as close as I could to SharePoint by overriding a lot of its styles with all the Office Fabric icons. So you get those things that look native and not like the typical Bootstrap icons and all that kind of stuff that many of the other controls that are not SPFx controls have. So that's how I did some of that stuff. And then just a word, on the structure of this. So kind of over here on the left are all of my different components. So default container, his job is sort of like a little bit like a router in my Angular mind to figure out if I should show a list of questions or a specific question or even an error. And then if you show a question, it's going to show, its replies and replies to replies and so on like that. So questions, reply list, and reply kind of build a structure, and a reply will in turn to a reply list and a reply. So there's a big component structure interaction there. And then, of course, question list and question. So, all of those things work together. And that's where Redux and all of its stuff really was helpful because, they all have their carved off properties and state and actions from the state that's kind of all defined here, which this is a humongous file, but it's the business logic wrapper and the sort of workhorse around stuff like getting questions and doing things like setting up our order by, our filtering, if I'm moving from page to page of questions and all that kind of stuff. So this was really helpful to me, but I'm seeing the writing on the wall with hooks and certainly would start moving more to that direction and, doing things that way. So that's the code in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions on it, if there are any.
So really cool stuff, Bo. And when I'm watching this code and everything, it's just strike me as well. I'm just going to be open and transparent, which I typically, and it's cool to see how awesome stuff people build with PnPjs and the tooling and controls, which we built together with community, which really shows the power. So the basics and the PnPjs as an example is a fundamental piece in this one as well. One thing what I wanted to actually ask, not about the code, is that you had in your property pane, you had web part information, and it says version 1.0.3. I think I know the answer for this one, but I think it's actually good for the other ones to hear as well. So why do you have that? Why has that come to be useful? And
yeah, I think it's, for me, this web part is deployed in the tenant-based app catalog and then made available on thousands of site collections. And every now and then, when you're doing upgrades, you want to know kind of unequivocally, am I running the latest version of the code or the code that I would expect to be running? So that's really helpful without having to run those get PnP app commands and all that kind of stuff where you might have a mismatch between what's in the app catalog and what's actually deployed to your site. So
Yep, absolutely makes sense. It's a nice small, let's say, make it easy for end user to actually have a look on that, or your support can potentially say, okay, so can you double check that it's running the right version, and they can easily see that from the site level without any complexity. So pretty cool. So that's really cool. But I think that's it for now. So thank you for community's shout outs.
So you mentioned community. None of this would be possible without all those people. PnP provisioning schema for all that stuff. PnPjs, the DevFX web parts, the React controls, and Quill, and many more. So that's my shout out to all those people who I've learned from and built on.
Yeah, thank you, Bo. Thank you. Thank you. I will steal the presentation because we're running on the hour. Really cool demo, really great stuff. And hopefully it will be open source. Maybe it's not, who knows, but it's still really cool to see the thinking and the implementation behind the scenes. And this is precisely what we also want to have within this course, because it's about sharing learnings, it's about sharing what works and what doesn't, and having a discussion on the different patterns, because that way we learn as a group of people rather than individuals. So thank you, Bo, for that one. I think that's it for now. We're running on the hour. I will actually do some boilerplate slides whenever I find where my mouse is. There it is. So we will not, unfortunately, have a Q&A. Once again, we had three awesome demos, and we're having this constant debate on that should we have 2 demos on this course and then Q&A time, or should we have 3 demos and then potential Q&A in the chats or before the call. Please give us feedback on the chat on that one as well, because we never have time for Q&A. But then, do we want to have a Q&A time? It's so hard. There's so much demand for the demos as well, and we want to show your awesomeness and your awesome demos in the future. So please let us know from a feedback perspective. And the recording will be available in 24 hours in a Microsoft 365 SharePoint community YouTube channel, AKMS M365 PnP videos. We are moving into this M365 PnP brand usage on the PnP side, so just letting you know there. Next SPFx call is on April 9th. And the next Microsoft 365 General Dev Sync call on a week from now is on Thursday, April 2nd, where we talk about also Microsoft Teams. Teams demo is queued up for that one again, but another perspective. I think it's single sign-on implementation for using the Yo Teams, and then a few other demos as well. But that's pretty much all we're going to cover today. We have plenty of community calls, plenty of demos, and plenty of stuff available moving. Join those which you find interesting. Please give us feedback all the time. If something isn't interesting and we should change something, let us know. We are here to help you. That's a really important thing for everybody to understand. So I'm here, my primary objective is to help you, not other way around. So I need to know what you need to be successful. So thank you for that one. And in the SharePoint community side, we've been certainly doing that in the past as well, but let's keep on doing that in the future. But that's it for now. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for one more time for the great demos, and we'll be definitely in touch. Stay safe out there, and let's meet latest in the week. Latest in the week. Bye-bye.